First off, thank you guys very much for allowing me to be here. Unfortunately, 2 minutes really isn't long enough, and 10 to 15 minutes would let me kind of scratch the surface of what's brought me here today. This bill starts off well. It needs a lot added to it to give the parents the full rights and powers that we deserve. And in order to do that, you guys are going to have to ask some questions of your constituents. So that's why I'm here. I want you to ask me why special education's consents were not sent out to me until 42 days after they were requested by school administration. I want you to ask why my son returned home with bruises and welts one day after his 6th birthday of a kindergartner from his principal and assistant principal while awaiting those evaluations to be taken. Ask me why my son's principal and assistant principal carried him by his arms and his legs, then dragging him by his feet, or with his feet behind him, were at one point behind closed doors in an office with him, with no video, before finally barricading him in a room as he fought to get out because he was terrified. Ask me why his assistant principal confidently owned the decision to then deny him access to his school counselor after this abuse incident, despite it also being his regularly scheduled counseling day, from which we had previously consented. Ask me why the superintendent never filed any of this with the TEA, despite knowing about it within 4 hours of me sending the email 2 days later, informing him also that I would be filing a CPS report. It was legally obligated to him under 14 TAC 249.14, but nobody at the school ever reported to CPS. Ask me why the principal and assistant principal are still leading a campus that now houses a pre-K servicing 3 to 4-year-olds after central administration agreed in writing and in audio recording that the restraints they deployed on our son violated their district policies and CPI standards. Ask me why the superintendent confirmed finding incidents...
Wrap up your testimony. I'm sure we'll have questions for you.
I'm sure. Missing disciplinary, placement, and restraint reports, none of which were provided to us within 24 hours that's legally mandated, and then admitted to my wife that his team would, don't worry, backdate and fill those reports so that they were properly provided to the state. Asked me why district council described me as a random adult seeking copies of surveillance footage with students on it after submitting it in writing, then seeking an opinion that the AG bar it from us under protections of Homeland Security.
All right. Please wrap up your testimony. We'll move on and we'll come back with questions. Okay. 2 minutes.
And then ask me why TEA investigations dropped their investigation under the 249.14.
We're here
because
we're here to talk about this bill. We'll get into that. We want to talk about what this bill could do to help the situation you described. So
then I'll go ahead and wrap up. I'll let you guys ask questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your testimony. Members, any questions from the panel? Chair recognizes Representative Leo Wilson for a question.
Yes, to the dad. I can't remember what your name is.
Timothy Woolsey.
Okay. When I've been retired for 4 years, but when I was in school, all special ed teachers, all administrators had to be trained in the CPI training. Did your administrator have that training?
They both actually had that training. And the problem is they did not employ that training. I'm also CPI trained. I know exactly the types of restraints that are authorized for children that are at the kindergarten level. None of them include carrying a child by his arms and legs through a hallway, dragging his feet behind him, and barricading him in a room.
Did you see that on video?
I did see that on video. In fact, we requested a copy of it as part of his educational record, which is defined by the U.S. Department of Education. We then received a letter from district council addressed to the AG claiming that I was an adult seeking a copy of surveillance footage of a student involved in an incident, when I clearly explained to them the context of who I was, what happened that day to my son, and who was involved. Of course, based on that false context, the AG said, yeah, you can't give that to him. They did allow us to see it, but it sure is really hard for me to prove something if I can't show it to people.
Okay.
Now, I do have audio recording of that meeting where you hear me react to what I saw. You hear me asking questions.
But right now, in current law, you can see the video, but you can't take the video. Or you can't.
There's nothing that says you can't take it.
Okay.
There's nothing that says you can't take it.
But there's nothing that says you can.
The U.S. Department of Education, under what a student's general education record is, very explicitly lists video recordings as part of that record, which we are entitled to copies of.
Okay. Okay. And then you from Texas 911. I have a parental rights handbook that I'm working on to try to compile all of the various things in one central location. It also would require school board members to be trained on it. Would you mind looking at that bill and making sure I have, in your opinion, everything on it?
We would welcome the opportunity to.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Woolsey, throughout this, because as we look at this in the context of House Bill 7, did you go through a grievance process with your local school board? I mean, it sounds like it, but could you, just for our benefit, kind of a real world example of, whether or not it was appealed to the commissioner or wasn't? Could you describe that for us, please?
So, including the upcoming due process hearing through the TEA, that's going to happen in May after 2 postponements. That will mark effectively the 7th tier of the grievance process that the 7th, okay, over a course of 15 months. So when we first, and this was done by the administrators of the school, which are effectively level 1 of grievance. Okay, so you can pretty much guess as to how that meeting went. We immediately went after that to the executive director of elementary education.
That's level 2, right?
Level 2.
Okay. All right.
I've got an audio recording of my phone call with that lady. She asks me things like, what is it you're hoping to find out of this complaint and grievance? What are you hoping to accomplish out of this? So she's doing everything that is, in fact, a grievance process. We didn't get it there. And so we talked to the superintendent and didn't get it there.
Okay. That's still part of level 2, right, I guess?
Nope. That's level 3 at that
point. Oh, that's level 3. Did you go to the school board?
So once the superintendent figured out that he wasn't going to get anywhere with us over the phone, then we were told now we have to actually file the grievance process. And we got kicked all the way back to level 1.
So you had to go back to the campus.
Uh-huh.
Okay, got it.
Yep. And then go back to level 2, and then go back to level 3, which was the board. Now, we're mandated to be provided with audio recordings of all of those hearings. Except on level 3, they decided to have it in a closed session. School board still recorded it, but they are barring it from us because it's, quote, confidential.
You were there, right?
Yep, I was there, and I've got emails.
So they clear the room. You're in the room with the school board. I'm trying to set
my
this.
wife and I are in the room with 19 school representatives, including the personal attorney of the principal who we are alleging, and we did not authorize him to be there, which is clearly a violation of my son's verbal rights. Is that paint a picture for you?
Yeah. I just wanted to, because this really speaks to what the bill hopes to get at.
Yep.
So at that
what I will
point,
say is that the framework is there, and what your bill does is strengthen that framework. The problem is the players in the system. This is why schools cannot and should not be allowed to investigate and police themselves. They cannot be trusted to do it when they are going to hide and protect the people that are doing the wrong against the children. My son endured abuse from November of 23 until we disallowed him from reattending that campus the following day. We immediately took him to his pediatrician, had him looked at. No clotting or bruising ailments that could explain this, other than violent, aggressive physical abuse. And those women are still leading that campus with 3- and 4-year-olds on it now. Something has got to change. And my son's fight has to come to the forefront.
Thank Chair recognizes Representative Kerwin for a question.
After hearing your story, I am thinking that the RPT last summer had a plank about creating an inspector general. Is that correct? From the outside of TEA? And then I was just reading in what you brought in today, there must be an independent oversight body reporting directly to the State Board of Education to hold TEA accountable. If that were in place now, would this all have happened? Do you think that this might be a good preventative thing to look at for the bill?
I think so. And to go back to your to talking about having to hold the TEA accountable, in December, I received a letter from the TEA jurisdiction board from a lady named Naomi Roach. Spoken with her a couple times since then. That she was referring it to the Employee Investigations Division, and it was assigned to Jennifer Latham, who's an investigator with that division. Then about a month ago, I received a letter, an email from Miss Latham saying that it was being dismissed. Now, this investigation was solely under 14 Texas Administration Code 249.14, which is the mandatory reporting to the TEA from a superintendent of even just alleged abuse. Not proven, but just alleged. Because that's serious too. Okay? So when I got this dismissal letter, I gave her a call, recorded the conversation, and I said, why? All it just says is that you're dismissing. Well, yes, I probably should have put more in there, but of course that would have been in writing. She said, we're essentially dismissing it because we know that you have a due process meeting coming up. And I said, yes. I said, but that's for the administrators. That has nothing to do with your investigation into the superintendent on 14249.14. Well, yes, you're right. But when I called to introduce myself to school council, I was very aggressively told to stay in my lane and that I was violating the principal's due process by investigating. So we dropped it until we hear further. That is the investigative body that is currently in action saying, no, yeah, okay, we're good. You told us to go away, so we will. So that we can allow you to police yourself.
And if I can just add to what
Hold up just 1 second.
Yes,
Let me make
yes,
sure.
sir.
Representative Kerwin, did you have any more questions?
No, I just really wanted your input about creating that position to hold TEA accountable.
I think it would absolutely go a long way in doing that.
Thank you.
All right, Chair recognizes a representative Schoolcraft for a question. And
Mr. Woolsey, what happened as far as a criminal complaint here?
So after the 48-hour time period, or towards the end of the 48-hour time period, 2 days later actually was his initial 504 meeting, which we had been waiting over a month and a half to have after requesting it a second time. So we didn't even get to the 504 meeting yet before he came home with bruises from abuse. We filed the CPS report. We informed, through an email, we informed the superintendent and the school board. I have proof that they read that email within 4 hours of me sending it on the 22nd. Really nothing happened after that. We never heard from the superintendent or the school board, ever. So then I was like, well, heck, I'll file a police report with the Fort Worth Police Department. 2 police officers showed up, said, okay, we hear there's abuse that's happened. Who is the alleged perpetrators? And I said, it's the principal and assistant principal of that school across the street. And they said, oh, whoa, we can't touch that. That's not our jurisdiction. They refused to take a report. They refused to take a report. I have let the TEA, the entire basis of our complaint has always been built on proven abuse of my son. And at no point has the TEA offered the complaint process that they sat up here and told you was in action? At no point. In fact, at every turn, they took the opportunity to pass it off and say, Mr. Woolsey, just do the due process, justice will be served. But here I sit today.
And Mr. Woolsey's situation is not isolated. We talked to a number of parents who have similar cases like this. They don't all have the availability to come or the courage to come and speak because they're also, targeted in their own school districts. And so this is not an isolated case.
Mr. Woolsey, what happened with the CPS complaint?
So the CPS officer showed up to the school. He interviewed the two ladies that abused my son and had them show him the video footage. He then called me and said, Mr. Woolsey, there's nothing disturbing on that video footage, so we're going to dismiss this. I can't imagine any person, any parent, any adult that sits there and watches two women carry a 5-year-old by his arms and legs, drags his feet behind him, barricades him in a room, and then takes him in a closed office where there is no surveillance or audio and says, yep, this all checks out. This is my book. Not going to do anything about it. There were 7 different videos that made up this entire ordeal over the span of about 45 minutes. And I promise you, he was not shown the proper videos. So he dropped it. Since then, after we've accumulated over 1,000 pages of evidence and over 6 hours of audio recording, I've gotten back in touch with the Department of Family Protective Services, had them reopen this, and they have since referred it to the Fort Worth Police Department because they believe the police department now has jurisdiction. So we are now going to be going down that process with this new information of trying to get a criminal case filed of child abuse against these women.
And what school district is this?
Northwest Independent School District.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair recognizes Chairman Leach. Okay. Members, any more questions? All right. Chair recognizes Vice Chair Bernal.
Just one. Just wondering, in your experience, how much of this overlaps? Is it a significant overlap percentage-wise, where the students are those receiving special education services?
Yes, both physically and sexually. Those abuse cases are a very high percentage of special ed students, which makes this even more imperative to talk about. And if I could just say, I know we talked about this referral for criminal conduct, which is, it doesn't happen. And I would be happy to forward to any member of the committee the public information request we made of the TEA asking if they ever refer any conduct that they find potentially criminal to law enforcement. The answer was no. No. So I'm not sure if Mr. Rodriguez perjured himself here or if we got bad information in the public information request, but the system is what cannot stand. We do need the outside independent investigations and oversight.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Spiller, real quick. So, given in this bill and kind of, as implemented in the real world, if a teacher were to observe bruises on a child, are they not currently compelled to report that to CPS within 48 hours, as I believe the family code states?
I would
immediately.
think, but I
is
actually
that,
don't know on bruises.
yeah, if I know that there's a. That's I don't know. I thought.
I haven't looked at the CPS aspect of this stuff in, gosh, it's probably been 10, 15 years now. So I'm probably not the best person to ask. He might
Okay,
be.
yeah, Mr. Woolsey.
So I'm actually a state certified teacher. You have a legal mandate. We are required reporters, along a number of other professions. Even if you have a hint that something foul might be at play, and you don't report within 48 hours, you could be held criminally liable. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just trying to.
Do you mind if I follow that up? And I think
Yes, sir.
pointed to it. You know, one of the things that's so frustrating and that we're not seeing is immediate reporting to law enforcement. Abuse is a crime. Sexual abuse is a crime. Sexual abuse evidence is time sensitive. If somebody goes home and bathes, you've degraded the evidence, you know, depending on what type of abuse it was. These things have got to be reported, and they're criminal, and law enforcement should be the front seat, and everything else should come afterwards. Otherwise, what do you get? You get tainted evidence, or a crime scene's not preserved, or whatever. So, and that's the thing that seems to go missing in, you know, and it doesn't really matter what system you're working with, whether it's children's facilities, healthcare facilities, nursing homes. I think I've probably debated or testified on probably all of those, and there's always this omission of, hey, call law enforcement first. This is a crime, and we need to do that.
All right, thank you. Members, any more questions for this panel? Representative Leo Wilson, you're recognized for a question.
Yes, when I was teaching, it had to be suspected abuse, though. You just didn't report because a kid had a bruise. Mr. Woolsey, again, when I was teaching, it may have changed, but if I performed CPI, I had to fill out a form. And I also picked up the phone and called the parent that the form was coming home and, you know, what we actually did. Did you get that form?
I'm so glad you asked about that. So, come to find out, the 3 restraints that were done to my son were on January 16th, February 7th, and March 20th. The first time we ever received a restraint form was on April 15th, and then I received 2 on April 17th. However, those came outside of the Laserfish reporting system that the district uses to send out all those reports automatically. They came from the principal's district email as a PDF form created by that system. That way it doesn't have a timestamp from the email. But the document does have a timestamp in the metadata. So when I check those metadatas, 2 of those forms that were sent to me on the 17th of April for January and February restraints were created 2 minutes before they were sent to me in April. The one that occurred on March 20th was created 50 hours after the incident and 17 minutes before she was questioned by her superiors, did you supply the form? So she saw it and went and goes, oops. Now, I also have proof through text messages that we got through public information requests that there was another restraint done on February 29th. We don't have a restraint form for that one, but I can prove it.
Thank you.
All right. Members, any more questions for this panel? All right. Thank you all very much for being here.